All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Colonel Ken Carmichael, J6 CIO, U.S. Cyber Command. This briefing is very, very dear to me because it's a briefing that can be very beneficial to U.S. Cyber Command writ large. And Mr. Rod Wallace from AWS is going to talk about something called Security Lakes. This is a briefing that he gave several months ago at Las Vegas, and my tech director got a chance to actually come and take that briefing. He brought it back to me. It is so forward-thinking, forward-looking. We'd be remiss if the Cyber Command didn't look more into this. So that's why I wanted him to come talk here at this conference to plant a seed that will hopefully grow in the future. With that, over to you, Mr. Rod Wallace. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Hey, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. So as I said, my name is Rod Wallace. I'm the general manager of a new service that we introduced at reInvent called Amazon Security Lake. I have only been at Amazon for about a year and a half, and the reason I mention that is because before I was at Amazon building stuff, I was a CISO, and a CISO for the largest education company in the world, protecting our kids' information that they do when they're doing courses online. And we all know the last few years in lockdown, there's a lot of online going on. So I just want to say by means of that I've lived on the protect side of data and the world and that sort of thing, and I've really felt the pain of I'm trying to keep everybody safe and secure. But it was a real great opportunity for me to come to AWS and then build something, I think, which is really important for people doing security work, and it's called Amazon Security Lake. So we have a process in Amazon called working backwards. That is how we decide what services to build and how to build them when we have an idea. And so when we were speaking with customers and security teams specifically on customers, they told us this. They told us that really they are running into a huge issue around managing security data. And the collection and analytics of data is really tough, is how they said it. They really broke it down to four things that were concerning them. The first one is the growing volume of security data. So we've always known logs, security logs, are kind of like the lifeblood of a security team. And we also know that a log that you never collect is visibility you'll never have again, kind of thing, right? And so we all live and die on logs. And as we move from workloads, being on-premise in our own data centers, we move to cloud, we've really had a lot of security benefits of moving those workloads to cloud. One of the advantages of cloud is that all those different services we consume all throw off logs. They throw off a lot of logs. And so what ends up happening, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but if you look at the volume of logs, doesn't matter which cloud you're on, it is way higher than probably what you got off on-premise devices. And so what has happened is security teams who have regularly had analysts thinking about where are the things that we need to find, that needle in the needle stack that we all go looking for, security teams found that they were spending more and more resources just doing data wrangling. And data wrangling is not doing what? It is not finding the things you need to be finding. It's just heavy lifting. And so they've told us that the growing volumes of security data, they can have petabytes, many petabytes a day of security data. And so they need help to deal with this. The second thing that we all know about is, if you're in this space, is that everything that generates a log generates it differently. So even if it's a DNS lookup or it's a log from a different email server or authentication system, they all look different. And so while all these different companies doing security sensors or what have you are very happy to send you logs, guess what they hand you? They hand you this like Tower of Babel. You've got all this information, none of it's normalized. Guess where the problem goes to analyze it? It goes to us. Right? We have to have a magic decoder ring. The other thing is the problem we've always dealt with, which is shadow IT, and that stuff that we don't have observability of. And so a lot of security teams, too, lament the fact that we have incomplete data. And so they wanted to make sure when they move workloads to cloud that there is no lack of coverage, that they have 100% coverage as soon as somebody spins something up. Because it's easy to spin stuff up in cloud. That's the whole point of it. but security teams need to have visibility of that. And so they said they want complete data and some way to deal with the inconsistencies. The third, and this is a big one that comes up especially today in the era where people want to do machine learning and really do anomaly-based detections rather than just simple rules, is customers tell us that in the current operating model where they take their data, their logs, and they ship them off to a provider or a vendor who does analytics, as soon as they ship that data away, they don't own it anymore. You don't own your own data. And also, whether you're in government or commercial, doesn't matter what, you write a big check when you send that data, because a lot of these companies charge you ingest. And so there's an economic element to not owning your own data. There is a second element, which is way more troubling about not owning your own data, that customers talk to us about. And that is that since we've moved to microservices and cloud-based architectures, the security industry around that, the number of new ways of doing security when you're doing containers or whatever it is, the security industry has taken off. The amount of innovation in the security space has taken off. But you cannot enjoy any of that innovation if your data is locked away in one provider's data store. So you just immediately take yourself out of the game from being able to follow innovation. And so this is a second reason that enterprises of any sort want to own their security data, is because they can decide which partners they want to work with without having to either pay again for sending their data or just not be able to afford to send their data elsewhere. So if they can have their own data store, then they can start to enjoy trying out innovation, or guess what? Build the capability in-house. There are some things that we want to analyze ourselves, and there's some things we're happy to have a third party to do, but you can't do it if you don't own your data. This is what they tell us. And it doesn't matter whether it's a bank, a hospital, like a healthcare firm, government, doesn't matter what. They all said this together. And the last is what I touched on a bit earlier. When I was when I was a CISO and we started moving from 150 data centers to putting everything on cloud, moving my whole security team from an on-prem mentality to a cloud mentality, I figured out that I needed to build a data repository so I could get oversight. You know, there was a holding company, had lots of different silos. I'm sure you're not familiar with this. They all do their own thing. Somehow you want to see security across all of it. I figured I better build a data lake that sits above everything else and gives me visibility. So I went to my VP, I went to Muthu and said, "Hey Muthu, I think we need to build a security lake." And he's like, "Yeah, sure, we can do that." So we put one person on it, and then it was 2, and then it was 4, and then it was 6. And all those people were doing was trying to figure out how to get the data from A to B, and then in a format that we could all read together and that sort of thing. So it was all data wrangling. I don't have an infinite budget. No security team there has an infinite budget that I've ever seen. And so every one of those people building my cloud that I was doing, I loved those people to death, but I hated the fact that they were doing what they were doing, because they were not finding security things. They were not producing outcomes. And so this is, again, what we hear. I was just meeting a large financial, you would all know, just last Friday, making acquisitions. You know, you hear about these banks that are kind of having trouble and they're being bought by other companies. The first thing that when they buy this company is, how do I drop security on this thing, you know? And they're going like, how do we move with this? And they need access to the data. And so the data wrangling is what they really lament. So this is what they told us, is that every person that they have doing data wrangling is a person not finding the bad things. That's death for a security team. So we kind of thought about this for a while, and we came back to them, customers, and we said, what if, like imagine, if we could build you a service that automatically builds you a data lake in your own accounts. So that means you own it. It's not hidden behind a wall that you pay to access. You own it in your account. And what if it centralized all those logs? So it doesn't matter where in the world they were collected. You could have regional storage. You could have, you know, any way you want. You can do it by account, what have you. But you wanted also a central rolled-up view. So if your operations need local stores, then you want roll-up stores. Like, give you that flexibility. Give you long-term retention. A lot of times when you get logs from some of the companies in this room here, they'll give you 30 days. They'll hold 30 days of logs and that's it. And we all know in security teams, one of the questions that we get is, did I ever see this? And so you need a way to store it long term, but also to be able to do that cost effectively. So how can you have policies? And the third piece is give you complete freedom for analytics. So nobody strapping you into, this is my flavor, and as long as it's my flavor, you can do what you like. So we said, what if we could do this? And they said, absolutely. So that's what we announced at reInvent last year in Vegas. This service will be going general available probably the end of this month. So it's in preview right now, which means it's free. And that's exactly what Amazon Security Lake does, is it centralizes all your data and your logs in your accounts. It optimizes it for storage and analytics. So it transforms the data into search-friendly, like high-speed search and search-capable format. One of the important things I'll speak about right after this is it normalizes the data. So if you remember me talking about the Tower of Babel before, and how a log from this root, this DNS source is different from that one, we normalize it to a common format, which I know is not a stranger to some of what you folks do, but we've taken a little bit of a different approach to try and make the whole industry start to normalize around a common thing. So off the shelf, you have normalization now rather than the problem being put on security teams. And last but not least, give you that analytics freedom. So let's talk about this normalization for a second. When we were speaking customers, they said, if you can help us with this data normalization issue, this would be huge, but I know you can't solve it, but can you advocate on our behalf? So we went around to a bunch of security companies and they said, we talked to them about this issue, and they said they're facing the exact same thing, is that if they're an analytics platform like a Splunk or an IBM or what have you, they have to write all these connectors and translators to manage all this data. And so they said you're really kind of pushing on an open door here if you can solve this. And one of the things that customers did tell us is they don't like anything proprietary. They do not want to be normalizing off of one company's standard. So what we did is we got together with these security teams. There's like 18 different companies, names that you would know, companies in this room. And they said, let's do this together. And so we created an open source schema called the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, OCSF. You can go look at it. It is truly open source. It was co-chaired by Splunk and AWS. And there are now 120 different entities in that organization, and the people who are making, of the product vendors in there, they are normalizing and creating their logs in this standard schema. So this means as if you have your data lake now and they write data into your data lake, the Tower of Babel's gone. It's all completely standard. And what's the point of having a standard schema? The point is that if one silo or one company writes a detection, it's immediately transportable to a different silo, or a different company can run it right out of the box. Because we don't know anymore, and we don't care about whether it was a Windows machine or a Mac, or what kind of server it was running. We don't care. The logs are all the same. And so you have immediate transportability of analytics. Think about machine learning. When we talk about machine learning, the hardest problem in machine learning is not signing up for the machine learning service. It's having well-ordered data that you can train on, that's labeled properly and organized properly. If your data is now all in a common schema, that hard problem just went away. It's gone. Training for machine learning now is a snap. And so turning the whole industry to be able to do this is like going to completely solve any of this sort of large ML you want to do, whether it's analytical, generative, whatever it is. And so of these 120 organizations, it's not just security companies. We have members of we have educational institutions, we have government agencies, U.S. government agencies for sure. MITRE and organizations like that are mapping to Open OCSF, and enterprise users are also in there as well. So the point again here being is I think we've got a movement happening to drive standardization. And those of you, if you're in procurement at all, some of the government folks who are involved in this are considering that this is perhaps a great procurement standard as well, especially if you can buy a system and you can see what it's covering on MITRE, and off you go to the races. So OCSF is taking off. It's well on the rails, and we have, as I said, a lot of vendors participating in it. I want to talk a little bit about what Security Lake does really quickly in 3 charts in really simple format. So first thing it does is when you sign up for the service, it creates an S3 bucket in your AWS account, and it creates it in various regions as well. We'll talk about that. And the little green piece on the left that's where we do the ingestion of logs. And that log ingest can be, and I'll talk about it in a second, it doesn't just have to be from AWS, it can be from anywhere you want to pull logs. The second thing it does on the right-hand side in the blue is manage the subscribers, or the people who want to use the data in the lake. And another thing we want to do there is take the friction out of that to make it really easy to connect those subscribers. And the subscriber could be an analytics company. It could be a different organization that you want to give limited access to or control that access. Any of those things. And the last piece is in the white at the bottom is the OCSF piece, the normalization. We have a function which will take logs and convert them to OCSF if need be, okay? So that's what happens when you hit the button, this magical S3 bucket that shows up with all these things. And it's based, Security Lake is really based out of services you already know. So as we start talking about looking on the high side of different things, it uses Lake Formation, Glue, and Lambda, and services that AWS either has in our different government regions or will have, is working towards have that. But it's really just a control plane layer that automates all this stuff for you. So those 8 people working your Security Lake can become like 0. So on the ingest side, the way it works is we pull logs in. In the case of Amazon, we're bringing in the sources that customer, at GA anyways, and we have it right now, we're bringing in the sources that customers said are the most important ones for them for security. So that's VPC flow logs, and it's CloudTrail, and it's Security Hub findings, et cetera, et cetera. We have a list of about 30, and we'll just keep working to bring those in. We transform them to OCSF, write them into your lake. By the way, this collection happens invisibly to any of your account owners. So what does this mean? It means that they do not know necessarily that you're collecting logs from their accounts, and they can't turn those off. So we do it behind the scenes in the machine, so no bad actor can turn off your logging because they don't know what's happening, right? But it's not just AWS logs, like I said. So you can see down there in the green, we've got companies like Cisco Rocked, or Palo Alto, Zscaler. You name your top tier security companies and startups, and I'll show you them in a bit. We also bring their logs in, but they're already writing them in this OCSF standard, right? So they just come right into your lake. So this is how you hydrate your lake. What do you do with the data? So that's where the subscriber piece comes in. So you can just quite easily through the console say, hey, it's already in AWS. I want to do some of my own analytics. I'll go use Amazon Analytics Services. So Athena or SageMaker for machine learning or OpenSearch. That's all available to you. And your Security Lake will automatically register your data with those services. So again, take one of those people you had working on your lake, put them up on the analytics side now, because they don't have to take care of that. They can just start immediately doing investigations. Okay, so but you might want to use one of the SIEM products or analytics products from a third party, and that's fine. So we partner with all the big names, and we'll talk about that. But you just call them a subscriber, you hook them up, you tell them what data you want them to see, and they can see your data. Now, one thing I just want to talk a little bit about is one of the other things that we're trying to drive into the security industry, and that is the realization that data lakes are here. I think all of you here probably know that security analytics and security is a big data problem. You would not be surprised how many companies don't want you to think that. They want you to think that you should give them your data, right? And a big data problem means you should be realizing that security lakes exist, and if security lakes exist, companies need to, and analytics companies need to act in a different way. Rather than asking to ingest all of your data and charge you for it, what they really need to do is search your data. They need to be an application that rides on top of your data lake and just focuses on providing their security value. And so lakes are here. You know lakes are here. We know lakes are here. The security industry, I think, is starting to get there right now. And so some of the models that we have and we're asking these companies to adopt is a search in place model rather than an ingest and transfer the data. So what does this mean? It means you keep your data. It means you don't have to transfer your data, or you only would transfer just what they need for the analytics. And then that security company can dump the data. They don't have to hang on to it again because it's always available back in the security lake. Okay, so we're kind of creating a motion here to lakeify and get that mentality out that the data collection layer and the analytics layer should be separate layers. Okay, Gartner, IDC, have started to build this into their standard architectures. When we announced Preview, here are all the companies that joined up in integrating with Security Lake. So that means they converted to OCSF, and they went into the Parquet and other search-friendly formats. You will see about double this number when we GA in about 30 days from now. Okay, and we're talking right now with about 150 different companies around integrating with Lake, and that's just around this sort of security business. So think of all the sensors and analytics that you use. You'll see 150 of these by the end of the year. But more importantly, we're bringing in security logs from the other applications that we'd use. So whether it's in your supply chain or people management or enterprise resource management, we're starting to bring in logs from those too. Okay, so because we know that chief operating officers and CIOs don't just care about the security applications and the security stuff, but it's all the other applications that you use in Mission. Okay, so we're bringing in those logs as well. So how hard is it to enable Security Lake in your AWS organization? Well, I'm going to actually take you through this because it's not that hard. So what do you do? What's the first thing you do is you sign up and say, hey, I want to start with Security Lake. So what you do is you set up, very importantly, a delegate. So your person who owns your AWS organization delegates one account. Typically, the CISO team or the security team is they're the owner of the service. So he says, hey, you're in control. So you say, here is the kind of account that I want to give control. So that's one mouse click. Then what you say is, hey, what kind of sources would you like to ingest? And this is the case of AWS sources. So you can either say, hey, I want all sources, or I want to pick from a list. So security team says, I want all sources. And then what regions do you want to collect from? Are you just here in IAD? Do you have some in Europe? Do you have some in Africa? Like, where do you want from? You can just say, hey, you know what? All regions, or select regions. You say all regions. And then you say which accounts in those regions. And you can say all accounts, and then you can, more importantly, the really important button for security teams is that lower left-hand one, which says enable all new accounts. So when you hit that, what that means is we'll watch, and anytime somebody spins up a new account, bam, we collect the logs for it. So you don't have shadow IT anymore. It just automatically does it. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mouse clicks. And then what you say is, where's the target that I want this data to go? Where's my roll-up target? So you can pick, let's say like Europe, if you want to roll everything to Frankfurt, and the US, you want to roll everything here to Virginia or what have you. You just pick that. So that's like 6, 7 mouse clicks or whatever. And then if you want to, you can say, hey, I only want to keep this in hot storage for like 90 days, and then I want to roll it over into lower priced, cold storage. You can select that if you want. And once you do that, that's it. So 10 clicks or less, and you've got now log coverage for AWS logs for your entire organization as it is today, but as it evolves as well. We'll just keep following it. To add your third-party sources, like a CrowdStrike or whatever you want to that, is a couple of clicks as well. And to add on an analytics package, a couple of clicks. We take care of creating all the roles and the permissions and things that you can tell that software about. It will automatically collect to your lake. So that is kind of simplicity. So all of those 8 people that I had working on mine go to 0 now. It's a few minutes of one person's time to get this up and going. And this is all contained within the security team's control. Nobody else can touch it. So then the point is you just connect your analytics, however you want, to this. So we talked about the 2 analytics methods. One is a data access model, or one's a query model. The query is that one where they just query in place and take the data out, or the other one is they can take a copy if you want to let them. And so all of the kind of big companies that you know have already leaned in on this. They're doing analytics based on OCSF data. They're doing it based on these models in Security Lake. So whether it's Datadog or Splunk or SageMaker for AWS, they've all leaned in. It just works. As well, Amazon's security services are also connecting to Security Lake. So Security Lake will become the central data reservoir for detective, guard duty, inspector, places like that. So all the data will go into Security Lake. Okay, and they'll then be able to do retrospective or threat analyses on your services within AWS or outside of AWS. The last thing I just want to talk about pricing, and the reason I'm going to just talk about pricing briefly is because there's just an important point that I want to make about our philosophy. So one of our first tenets that we have of building Security Lake was that no security team should ever fail to collect a log because they ran out of budget. That was our very first tenet. And so all of us who've actually had to write a check for collecting logs knows that you have this hard decision every day. Can I afford this noisy kind of like high volume log source because it's super expensive to collect and store? So we're trying to make sure that never happens. And the point I'm trying to say here is there is no charge for you to use your data from Security Lake. Zero. Like, we don't charge for that. If you run Athena or OpenSearch or an AWS service, you'll pay for that. The storage of the data is your S3 negotiated storage rate. It's not, we don't add anything on top because it's just S3 in your account. That's really what it is. It's an S3 bucket. So you have your own ability to manage that cost and negotiate your S3 storage price. But here's the most important part. The charge to bring third-party logs in, so anything non-AWS, is precisely zero. We don't charge anything to bring in any of your sensor data that's not an AWS log source. You can just bring it in for nothing. Why? Because, yeah, we do some work to take the friction out of you connecting that, but then we're not in the data path. We're not converting it to OCSF, because guess why? We all agreed that we would generate our logs natively in OCSF because that open source project, right? So we don't need to add any more values. So your data can just come in for free from all those sensors, okay? For AWS log sources, you just pay the same price as on the price list anyways for AWS. There's no added on fee. We have a small fee that we charge to do OCSF conversion. It's tiny because we attract costs when we do that. So the point being here is we really want customers to be able to collect those logs and use them and put their time into using the logs rather than collecting them. So that's the only reason I mentioned pricing here is to hit that number one tenet of not failing to collect the log because of budget. Okay, so that's a real brief 30 minutes or so on Security Lake. It's not any more complicated than that. What's the mission and where are we going? The mission right now is the whole point of a Security Lake is to get more stuff in and make it easier to get stuff in it. And then make it super easy to make it useful. And so that's our mission. So we'll add more log sources, we'll get more companies driving in, we'll enrich the data, we'll allow you to enrich it with side information like GeoIP, threat intelligence, those kinds of things. You can bring your own enrichments in today if you want. We're not doing analytics. We're not trying to be a SIEM or an analytics package because this room is full of companies that do that and they do it really well, and the whole point was for you to have choice of what you want to do. So we're sticking with more data sources in and more data sources out. Okay, that is it. Any questions? I don't know how we do questions even. Go ahead. I can't hear you, my friend. I will repeat your question if you go. There you go.
Could you upload a copy of these slides somewhere, or are they posted somewhere, or is all the information on the website?
Yeah, the information is all on the, if you just look up Amazon Security Lake, you'll see it all up there. Yep. Other questions? All right, everything is on the webpage. The partners are all listed there. Their technical documentation is there. There are examples of how to do QuickSight dashboards and OpenSearch searches and Athena queries, and so keep watching. There'll be a lot more resources there. And then go to OCSF.io if you want, or GitHub, and you'll see OCSF in there. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
One quick question before you go. So you said that next month you're going fully operational with Security Links. How many data types are you bringing into the fold? How many data types are you approving?
In terms of AWS sources, we'll have 6 main ones, and we'll keep adding to those, but we'll have about 60 third parties
60 by when?
by the end of this month.
Copy. Thank you.